In a world where leaders are judged not just by what they achieve, but how they inspire. Imagine commanding a room like a battlefield general, turning every word into a weapon of influence. That's the power that Amos Balongo unlocks. Amos is an executive communications expert, keynote speaker, and communication coach. Amos empowers senior leaders to master the art of communication, elevating your visibility, earning the appreciation you deserve, and spotlighting your unique value. With 18 years of coaching elite military officers, Amos brings battle tested strategies to transform your presence. Today, we're focusing on intergenerational leadership and the power of communication. So, Amos, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim.
Hey, so my first question for you is what really got you into the communication coaching space?
You see, Tim, one of the greatest things any person, any human being can have is the ability to be able to communicate and connect. And being in the coaching space, even the leadership space, it's really wide. And I narrowed down into communication because of personal experiences I had had. And a lot of it was my inabilities to be an effective communicator. And through learning how to become an effective communicator, I realized that, if you're going to lead people, communication is it's a center, it's a core of being able to be a great leader because you can have a great message, but if you can't communicate it, you're just that message is dead in the water. So I figured I'd hone into that and coach people how to do it because I was once in that in that in that hole, if I will.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. And so I know that you have done some extensive experience coaching military officers as well as they transition out and into civilian space. So how did that first come about?
Well, that was interesting because I had some friends that were senior officers in the military, and they were getting ready to transition. And one of them approached me and said, "Hey, are you interested in helping me?" He was going to write a book as well as get into the coaching and speaking space. Now, this particular general was a friend of mine was a three-star general. And normally when a general speaks or walks into a room, people stand up. And it's really you give orders, people take them. Now, transitioning into the civilian world is a whole different ballgame. And through getting him ready with his book and getting him ready to transition into the civilian world, it was very clear that this is something that a lot of flag officers, if I will, need. And that's how I started off. And, he was able to get his book out and able to understand that, going because he had basically spent all his life in the military. And that transition was smoother for him because we went through really as clearly and as vividly as can be how the workplace looks like and what are some of the things he's going to be dealing with in the workplace that he doesn't deal with in the military. So, and I've enjoyed doing this because it's almost like having folks be able to unlearn and then relearn what they didn't know. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point that you have unlearn and then relearn what you didn't know. What is the most common misperception or misconception that you see people have when they get ready to transition out?
Well, I think one of it is that, it's the fact that they think that the skills and experiences are translatable exactly into the civilian world, but they're not unless you translate them. Because I can tell you, well, I was a three-star general in this, you know, within the Army or the Air Force, or as an admiral in the Navy and a three-star, and if I don't translate that, what that does in the civilian world, it becomes a little bit overwhelming because people are like, so what what is combat operations? What is this? What is that? And so I think the biggest challenge I see is how do you translate what you have learned over the years to the civilian world? Because in the military world, it translates itself. If I'm a two-star talking to a three-star or one-star talking to a three-star, they get the lingo, they get what it is, but the civilians have absolutely no idea. And a lot of times, a lot of flag officers miss opportunities in the civilian world simply because people are just intimidated by by their experiences. And I look at it as if you're a flag officer, you're a general, an admiral, you're essentially as a CEO of a company. That's really how I look at it. And if I can translate that and your accomplishments in that way, then it really sets you up for success in the civilian world.
No, that's a great point and a great way to take a look at it. I agree with you. Flag officers are pretty much like CEOs, at very varying different levels. So it's interesting that you've been working with senior flag officers, and lately there's been a lot of talk about the intergenerational gap that's in the workforce. You have the boomer generation that's getting ready to retire. Then you have, Generation X that's in the workplace, but they're getting ready to come out. You got the millennials and you have Gen Z coming in. And there's a big issue with communication in the workplace. So is that something that you're finding as well?
This has been, if I can put it in as simple terms as I can, is this has been one of the most exciting times for me in my career because we're looking at a wide spectrum of folks. You got the Gen Zs, the Gen Xs, the baby boomers, and what this is doing, it's either getting people to think differently and adopt or try and use your essentially strategies that you've learned in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s towards, for example, the Gen Zs. And that is a recipe for that plane will just not take off. Because what we're dealing with here is a very interesting intergenerational gap where at the palm of your hands now, you have more computing power than the computing power that sent the Apollo mission to the moon, to space. And so the younger generation is thinking fast, moving fast, expecting things fast. Additionally, you've got the folks who are essentially in leadership right now who that's not the way they came up the ranks. That's not the way they came up in the companies. So there's a gap there. There's a big gap. And that's where the communication comes in because the Gen Zs are not going away. In fact, the workforce as the baby boomers are phasing out, the workforce is being populated more by these younger folks. Now, it's up to us as leaders to be able to understand them and value them and figure out how do we work with them. Now, granted, there's got to be give and take, but you have to understand that if you try to basically employ communication strategies you used in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, it just doesn't work. Because back in the 80s, even in 90s, we wrote letters and it took 7 days for the letters to come back and then we responded and you know
Yeah.
and now it's a text and in fact it's like I texted you at 3 p.m. It's 3:45. How come I haven't gotten a response? And so there's there's a benefit in finding common ground between this intergenerational issue we're having, but the onus is on the leaders to be able to figure out how do we lead this younger folks? How do we get them ready for this leadership roles?
You brought up a really good point about how the younger generation, everything is super fast. The more senior seasoned generations, there's like a pace to it, there's a timing, there's a rhythm. So that gap, what is the expectation gap that we're seeing in the workplace right now? Is it on both sides of the spectrum? Like, they think I'm gonna enter the workforce and I'll be vice president and 2 years from now or like 6 months from now, whereas the senior folks are like, hey, there's a lot of knowledge that you have to have along the way. What is that expectation gap that we're finding?
Great question, Tim. It's on both sides. And we have young kids coming out of college and expecting to be running a company in 2 or 3 years. And many I meet who even take coaching sessions with me are like, I'm graduating college next year. I'm going to start with a six-figure salary job. I'm like, that doesn't work like that. There is something to be said about earning your professional stripes. You have to earn those professional stripes to be able to get to that point. Because at the end of the day, if I give you a Fortune 100 company to run and you're 2 years out of college, 3 years out of college, well, we're going to run into some challenges because you're just not seasoned enough. So one of the things that I see is very unrealistic expectations from the younger folks coming into companies. And on the other side, with the leaders, they just expect the younger folks to be able to work for the company for 25 years, make it to the top, get your gold watch, and retire. And now realizing that times have changed, and this younger generation, the loyalty is based on what's in it for me and how does it work for me? Because in this particular case, for a lot of these young folks, it's, does this fit my lifestyle? Back in the days, you took a job, you worked 60, 70 hours, and that's what you did. But now it's, does this fit into my lifestyle? Does this work for me? Because if it doesn't work for me, I'll just go somewhere else and find a job, another job. And when that doesn't work, I'll just get into the gig economy. And there's so many ways to make money now that, as a leader, you can't hold people hostage with a paycheck anymore. You
Mm.
have to create the environment where they are able to thrive, where it's conducive for them. Are they able to come to work with their pets? Are they able to take time off whenever they need to? Are we valuing their opinions? Are we listening to them? So it's there's just a lot of conversations that need to be had on both sides to be able to establish this is kind of where we meet in the middle, because I know that I'm not going to expect you to come in and work for the company for 20 years and become CEO. But on the other side, I also know that I'm not going to come in and in 2 years become a CEO. So what's the middle ground? And I think also for this, the younger folks, is how are you painting the real picture of what it takes? Is there upward mobility within the organization? And are you placing value just on monetary compensation, or are we also looking at the culture within the workplace? Because as a leader right now, and what I'm telling many leaders is, you could offer, a Gen Z $1,000 a year, that they won't take it. Someone else will offer a culture that fits them, and they'll go for the culture.
So you brought up a lot of really good points. So we're going to backtrack here a little bit. So you, cause it was so much. I was like, I didn't want to interrupt because you're on a roll. But
Yeah,
so it was interesting you brought up the whole six-figure thing because I was at the firing range the other day, and
right,
I overheard an instructor talking with a guy who worked at an insurance company in Hartford, and
right.
they were talking about how so many kids these days, and I call them kids, but they're really young adults, are getting bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, like one after the other. Then they try to go in the workplace and they're expecting six-figure salaries. And the executives of these companies are like, yeah, you have a degree, but you don't have any experience. So that expectation mix match has to be addressed somewhere. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I'm hearing it too in other places. And then you also brought up about the paycheck being held hostage in the cultures of organizations. So is it more so you think that the younger generation is focusing more on workplace culture and lifestyle culture and the work balance thing, or is it something else?
I believe it's a work-life balance, and the environment, and the culture that they go into, and they want to go into an environment where they feel suits them, and they're comfortable, and that to me is very key, because when you get people comfortable in an environment, then they're able to produce, and they're happy doing it. Now they might not stay in the company for 20 years, but the 5 years they're going to give you in your organization, they, they're going to produce, they're going to be happy, and everybody within the organization is really going to thrive, because then you have a culture that lifts everybody up, where everybody is comfortable. And as simple as that sounds, Tim, that's a very difficult thing to do, especially if you're stuck in a culture of come in and grind and put 80 hours and go home, and I'll call you on the weekend at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah,
That's the culture I grew up in. You work, 90 plus hours and then you still work on the weekends at times. And that's just what you do because that's what's expected. And I hear you. And I hear a lot of other people saying that that's not what they want. That's not what they value. So when it comes to this expectation gap, there's also an expectation gap, I think, probably on the senior side when they're looking at new executives coming into the fold. Because, like you said, They're maybe not as seasoned. So, how do we get people the right experience at the right levels so that we could work on workplace culture and we can work on developing the people?
I think that one of the things is when people join your company, there has to be a clear path. This is how you progress in the company. And if you want to get experiences in this field, these are the things you need to do to be able to get those experiences. And we need to be able to look at it. We need to take experience. And a lot of times we've looked at experience and we think, oh, they have to have done this for 20 years to have the experience. I think we need to shift that to be, have they done it and are they competent in it? Because being in a company for 20 years is what we're used to. Well, I've been in this company for 20 years, 25 years. So, yeah, granted, I've got experience. But there's somebody else who could have been in the company for just 2 years, but they're way ahead of you because their experiences are different. So I look at it as experience not in time, but in evaluated experience. And we take away the time and say, okay, you were exposed to this for 2 years. Let's see what your competency is. Because then
Okay.
that gives some of these younger folks coming in an opportunity to be like, okay, I don't need to stay in this role for 20 years to earn my stripes. I just need to be competent. But the competence comes with a certain level of experience and a certain level of time, but it doesn't have to be the 20, 30 years. Because another thing is, think about it. We have to move at the speed of business. Look at AI and look at the way business is moving. We can't afford, back in the days, yeah, you were in a role for 30 years, but now, everything is changing so fast that, what you're learning today could be different tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to move fast enough and adopt fast enough. And I think the key word I'm looking for here is adoption. How can we adopt to the speed of business, to the speed of how things are moving in the world?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And so when we talk about speed and we talk about, adoption and how do we get to the speed, it always brings up ethical questions for me because with AI, with trying to be first, with trying to be fast, it always has the risk of falling off on ethical sides on either way. And so how do you think the younger generation views ethics versus the senior generation? Because I think there's a big difference
Yes.
and ethics between the two. So can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yes, I think the the older generation and the folks that I've talked to have I always hear you need to be in a place long enough, you need to be in a place and be able to make mistakes, correct your mistakes, and learn from your mistakes and do things, by the book as best as you can. Now, younger generation looks at it as I need to be able to do the job. If, for example, I need to be able to do it well, and the ethics part, I've not seen a disconnect between, ethics. Because I look at ethics this way: either you have it or you don't. Either you're an ethical person or you're not. So it doesn't matter whether you're Gen Z or baby boomer. Ethics are ethics.
Okay.
It's the issue now comes in terms of how they look at it. One group says, "Hey, I need to be able to do the right thing." Another group says, I need to be able to do the right thing, but to be able to do the right thing, I need to have been in a place long enough to be able to do the right thing. So that's kind of how I look at it. But I think that I've never met any young person, and I coach quite a few of them who I've never seen a disconnect in ethics between a baby boomer and a Gen Z, for example.
No,
Yeah.
that's good because there's conversations out there with especially with the amount of information that's coming out there and the amount of information that's at someone's fingertips. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you necessarily should do something,
Right.
right? And so I mean, and honestly, this is why there's ethics and compliance officers in a lot of corporations. And they're like, okay, so what's the difference between me paying the fine and me fixing the problem, which costs more?
Hmm.
What's more cost effective in that standpoint? Not saying right or wrong, but as we move faster, do you foresee the risk of people making probably less informed decisions that they should have made versus it all pans out?
I think so. I think that's a risk of going fast and moving fast. I often say, we're moving very fast, but we're dying faster. We're living very fast, we're dying faster. There's a price to pay in living fast. There's a price to pay in, not letting things settle and so you can have a clarity. Use an example of a jug with mud in it. When you shake it, it's not clear. When you let the mud settle, you can be able to see it. So I would say that what I would impress upon, anybody in the fast space is look at it, or doing anything fast is look at it at what point am I borderline violating ethics? Be it ethics to human beings, be it ethics to the environment, be it is it ethical, what I'm doing. For example, environmental ethics is a big one. Are we following the rules and regulations? I'm in a company and we're producing some product. We want to do it really fast, but am I being ethical? Yeah, I can pay the fine, but paying the fine because I polluted doesn't make it with the pollution right. Or AI, where we're developing all these AI systems, and what am I training my AI to do? What am I equipping it with, and is this something that will be detrimental to people in the future? So it's a very interesting space, and I think that as much as it's evolving, we're evolving with it too, and that's why this is a very exciting. We have to have, and I'm glad you brought that up. We have to have ethics at the forefront of what we're doing.
No, absolutely. And I'm thinking about Gen Z as a whole, and I know it's bad to like think of them as a whole because everybody's different and they're all individuals, but they're very values based driven. And so
Right.
as too much, like they won't shop at a place or do business with a place if they view that business as being unethical or having a certain thing. Now, is that the same way when it comes to seeking employer or employment? Like they won't apply for a job at a certain location if they think they're unethical or have the potential to be?
Absolutely. And I have seen this a lot, and a lot of it is because, again, the power of technology. I'm able to use technology to figure out this is what this company's ethical standards are. So I'm not going to shop there, go to that restaurant, work for the company because their ethics don't fall in line with my values. And it ties me back to the whole culture thing. What's our culture? What are our values? Because people will buy that first before they even look at a paycheck.
It's a great point. And I hope everybody listening to this and watching to this kind of rewinds that like 35 seconds to just rehear that again. That culture is incredibly important and they'll buy into that before they buy into a paycheck. So I appreciate you bringing up that point. So we talked about expectations. What is another key aspect that you're seeing that people are just falling short on?
I think when we look at what we as leaders need to do to bring people up, we have to be intentional. We have to be intentional to lead people. Everybody deserves to be led well. And this is now more on the leadership side. And as a leader, if people are not following you, you're just out there taking a walk. And some of the expectations on the leadership side is that shape in or shape out. Hey, they've got to toe the line. I hear that a lot. But the line has changed. Things have changed. So we have to embrace the change as leaders and say, how do I walk down, instead of standing up on top of the mountain and tell everybody you need to come up, how do I walk down from the top of the mountain and come up with them and show them the way and tell them I'm right here with you. So that's another expectation not being met from the leadership side, you know.
No,
And
that's a
I
great
think,
point.
yeah, and
Go ahead.
every leader should take stock of who's working for them in the company and look and see how many Gen Zs do I have? How many baby boomers do I have? What's the intergenerational gap I have here? Because not doing that is, if you're a CEO of a company right now and you're not paying attention to that, you might as well be flying blind.
Yeah. And I bet there's a lot of people out there flying blind.
Yep. Because you've got 20 or 30 or 40 people that work for your company. They're coming from three or four or five different generations. You've got an interesting leadership opportunity there. And it's not a one size fits all anymore.
Absolutely. With being intentional on your leadership and who you're leading and really lowering that emotional resistance. And I really like how you talk about, they got to toe the line. They gotta do X, Y, and Z because that's what we expect. And I would imagine the counter argument to that is, well, why? Can you explain why? Is it because it's what we've always done? Or is there actual reason? Right.
Hmm.
So with being intentional about who we lead and how we're leading them. Um, when it comes to communicating with all different types of people, right? Email's been around for 50 plus years. We talked about letters, text messaging. What is the biggest issue that you see in that gap with communication?
Well, I think that many people make a mistake of saying that, hey, I communicated, and you get down to it, it's like, oh, I sent the emails, I sent the messages, I communicated. You didn't communicate. You just put it out there. Until people receive what you're sending out, you've not communicated. Because there's a loop there that you've got to close. First, you gotta get the water. It's like playing basketball. You can shoot as much as you want, but it doesn't go through the hoop. You're just out there shooting.
Right.
So how many people out there just firing blanks or shooting the just basically shooting the ball? It's not going through the hoop. There's so many. So you got to ask yourself, how am I getting the ball through the hoop? How am I connecting with my folks? And sending a two-page email is not communicating, getting the word out there. But how many people have received the word? That's a question we got to ask ourselves, and then go back and say, why aren't they receiving it? You know, we've got so many mediums of communicating. You might find that a certain group of people will do better by text, a certain group of people will do better by email, a certain group of people, heck, will do better on social media.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You send me a two-page email, I'm be honest with you, and unless you write my paycheck, I'm probably not gonna read it.
Yep,
It's just because I get you. You're competing with everybody's time.
yep. And
You
I
got
think we're getting into uh, a place where we have to be brief as can be. We have to be strategic, but then we also have to be bold at the same time because I want them to look at it, read it, and know exactly what they need to do. I want to be able to read my message and take action because otherwise, if my message doesn't have a call to action, then I'm just my words or my what I'm trying to communicate is just hanging out there. What are you anchoring your communication with? You got to anchor it with a call to action. You have to captivate them, and then you have to drive them where you want them to go, and then you have to anchor that communication with a call to action. Otherwise, you're just out there shooting the ball.
so my last question to you is then, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you were like, you know what? I really wish that you would ask this question. And that
Okay.
would be my question.
All right. That's a good one. That's a good one, Tim, because I'm so passionate about this that I could spend a lot of time doing this, but I'm gonna keep it simple for the interest of keeping it simple and talk about complexity versus simplicity. A lot of times we feel that communication has to be complex, and we forget that the power of communication is in the simplicity. Can people see what I'm trying to say? Can they hear it? Is it simple enough that everybody can understand it? And once we master the simplicity of how we communicate, we're halfway there. Keeping it simple and applicable is something that even the audience right now or people listening right now can do. How simple is it? If it's too complicated, go back to the drawing board. I want it simple enough that a fourth grader can read it and understand it. Because then you know your message is being understood. Because what's the point of putting out complex stuff? You see, life is already complex as it is. So if I give you something that's complex, chances of you applying it are pretty slim to none. So I've got to give it to you in a way that you can take it, you can apply it, and you can see some results. So we got to keep it simple. It's not that hard.
So, what is one thing that they could do to help keep it simple?
Okay, I would say if you're communicating, say you're writing a message and it's an email, for example, and I would want to maybe talk about organizational culture because I'm familiar with that. Talk about who you are, what you do, and how it makes an impact. Simple, in very simple terms. A lot of organizational cultural statements or mission statements are too complicated. They're too complicated. You know, if you have a fourth or fifth grader in your home, take your mission statement of your company, give it to them and ask them, do you understand what this is? And then have them tell you what it is. If they don't understand what it is, scrap it and go back to the drawing board. This is who we are, this is what we do, and this is the impact we make. As simple as that. If you're able to do that, that's one trick. I've got many tricks, but that's just a simple one. Find a fourth to eighth grader. Give them your mission statement. See if they understand what you do. If they don't, then go back to the drawing board or give me a call. I'll help you with that.
I know tons of people are going to have questions. They're going to want follow ups with you because intergenerational leadership is hard. And intergenerational leadership is even harder to meet with everybody to where they're at. Oftentimes, we want people to talk to us to where we're at. And as leaders, like you said earlier, we got to go down to where they're at and communicate with them. So, Amos, I really appreciate you being on the show today. And everyone's going to be able to reach out to you. So, thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you, Tim. It's been my pleasure.